Hello, welcome to Why Not Both. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I'm a musician and therapist in Los Angeles. Why Not Both is all about how our multiple passions inform our identity, and this season we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine and produced by Laura Studeris. If you like what you hear, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform and come spend time with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, and that is both on Instagram and on Twitter. For this episode, we got to chat with Jehnny Beth all about her new record, as well as the collection of stories that she's written, as well as acting, as well as the very nature of love itself. I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope that you do as well. So yes, welcome to Why Not Both, a podcast about people who do a bunch of stuff, which is ironic during our current times.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was listening to your new album, and it's absolutely amazing. So if you'd be up for talking about that, as well as the other
Thank you.
things that you do, you're welcome.
I'm glad you like it.
I'm glad I like it too. I was wondering when I was reading about it, there was a lot about the other things that you've been doing as well, and I was curious about those.
Writing the short stories.
Yeah.
I between recording sessions of To Love Is to Live, I started writing and ended up writing a book. It wasn't really planned at the beginning. I was just kind of fed up with lyric writing, or more than fed up, I just couldn't write any lyrics anymore.
Oh, wow.
I had this moment of drought. Yeah, I think I had written the lyrics of the album quite soon, and so when it was still we were still searching on the music and working with different people for the songs, I felt bored of writing lyrics, and I felt I had written what I needed for the record, and it felt that I always lyrics are sort of a small window into usually a much wider text I would have written, and so suddenly when I started writing prose, I felt liberated. I felt, I can do pages, about one thing, and I have more freedom and more space. Basically, it was just like, it felt like moving from a studio apartment to a 2-bedroom flat. Felt like suddenly I could stretch out and do some, I have a bit more room to express myself. So so I started writing and then ended up started writing dialogues and monologues, they're called. So we call them short stories, but actually they're like they're people talking. And they're in 2 parts, and monologues and dialogues. And I had written about 5, I think, and I met this publisher, Ali Braxton, who really loved what I had written and loved the idea of publishing as well an art book with pictures of Johnny Hostile that my partner, who had taken, who were the pictures were the inspiration for the stories originally. So I thought it was important to bring them together. And so the publisher was interested in that, and then he pushed me to write more. So I ended up writing 12 stories in the end. And they're all about the subject of sexuality and freedom, I suppose, but also jealousy, or like different sort of expressions of the same things. But some are quite scary, I think, and there's a variation of moods in it, and even some stories are quite dark and gore. And yeah, so, and the freedom I took on it is because the subject is being fantasies. I felt there was a lot of freedom to not necessarily stick to the facts or to reality, and I was really into the magical realism, of South American writers like Borges, and I felt that was a really great way to approach fantasies, in a sense of it doesn't have to be true, it can belong to the realm of imagination, which is probably the truest place for sexual expression.
Well, that's fascinating that you say that, because I think people sometimes are scared of fantasy because they fear that they will become reality, but there's a place to agree that something is fantasy, in fact, and that you can and that you can play in that, and in a way it's almost safer to play with those dark elements within fantasy, because that that's where they're living.
Yeah, and you shouldn't, whether they are concretized or not, whether they are one day enacted or not, they should have, I think we should claim a total freedom of thoughts in terms of imagination and imagining things that are can be a turn on, but not necessarily be very, realistic or
Yeah.
very even moral.
And a lot of people, I think, feel so much shame in imagining those things because then they're like, well, I don't want to harm someone, or I don't want that to come about in real life. And I think that that's
Yeah.
a good place for fantasy, because then you
Well,
can.
I think there's the same idea as the religion saying that a thought can be as sinful as an act. So I think there's this conscious of censorship inside our own heads about things. When I actually, when I was growing up, I think I was always thinking, if I attracted to other people, that means I'm not really in love with the person I'm with. And then as I got older, I realized that wasn't true. And actually, I allowed more and more myself freedom of imagination, and it doesn't mean betrayal. It doesn't mean anything. Like, it's pretty much impossible to live a life without those kind of thoughts. So
I was gonna say, like, that's very in tune with my life philosophy. And I remember as a teenager reading Anais Nin's work, Henry and June, and going, oh.
yeah.
It's this eye-opening moment for me, of, you can have different feelings for different people, and they do not in fact mean that you do not maintain those feelings for different people. And that other people feel those things. I was like, oh. Yeah, 16-year-old me was just mind blown.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to show alternatives, to present alternatives to people, because
Yes.
it doesn't mean that everybody has to do the same things, or it's not everything is for everybody. But I think it's great to have those sort of places where you can find different examples.
Well, yeah, and
And,
it makes people question their assumptions of what they thought had to happen, because
mhm.
they can maybe choose a kind of a mainstream narrative if it's a choice, as opposed to necessarily just choosing it because it's default and not thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of um, there's a lot of damage done by the idea of romanticism in love, in relationships in general. The idea that love has to confine to some certain rules and certain things need to happen so that the love is judged to be true and to be
Yes.
and I myself have had to, especially in my 20s, I had to deconstruct some of those assumptions and preconceptions that were sort of raised in me by my conditioning and just society in general. And I think it's or films, even entertainment, or the Hollywood industry, I think, has done a lot of damage in terms of what is love and what is a healthy relationship, and what we should, what it requires, and etc. And I think the assumption is always that love is something that falls from the sky, and that is not something you have to learn. Whereas actually, I think it's the opposite. And love is something you can shape for yourself, and you can have your own rules, and it doesn't have to be the common rules of monogamy, marriage, and children, and family, etc. If you don't want it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I love that you said that you learn love, because in some ways people give and receive love in such different ways. And sometimes the language that you might speak is not the language that someone that you love receives. I was thinking about what you were saying, that especially, the primacy of romantic love, that I think that one, there's so many other kinds of love that then get devalued, and that there's so many other expressions of emotions, even that aren't necessarily love, that then are considered less than, which then also get devalued, I guess. That I agree with you that the Hollywood narrative, and that it just falls from the sky, I think does a disservice to romantic love itself, as well as the other kinds of love.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it was important for me to write a book where I could truly express in a fiction, in different scenarios and different styles, and um, maybe my own conceptions of relationships and love and sexuality, and but also the conceptions of people around me, people have heard talking, and friends. And because the book is so, as I said, was inspired by pictures, and my partner Jehnny Beth had when we moved to Paris 3 years ago, he started a photography,
Mhm.
and started taking pictures of friends, and in our apartment, and then in different hotels or places we would stay around the world while
Mhm.
traveling. And it became, and all the pictures are anonymous, so you never see the face. And
Mm.
I actually think it's quite important, because and we live in a society that's quite obsessed with the face, with the selfie,
Yeah.
with the identity. And when you remove that, it becomes much more free, and the body is more able to express itself, and even nudity is not a problem anymore. And there is this sort of um, you lose the apprehension of exposing your nudity, your body.
Mm.
You use the fear of being of judgment, and to be questioned for what you're doing. So which enabled a lot of liberation of sort of the speech and people talking about the experiences, and a lot of that has influenced me as well.
I was actually wondering that if any of the stories were influenced by your interactions with the people who were being photographed or anything that they said, or were they like kind of flights of fancy that you took from the images themselves?
It's a mix.
Gotcha.
It's Yeah, it's really a mix of my own experiences, and things I've heard, and so it's a real mix. And as parts of it are also my own imagination. You
That's
know,
so wonderful. I'm so curious to see these photographs now.
yeah. The book. There's two books coming out. So there's a paperback sort of book with only one picture by per stories, and
Mm.
then there's an art book with 300 or 400 pages of beautiful pictures, and six stories in it as well.
Wow. And that's so beautiful. What a wonderful way to collaborate as well.
Yeah, and it was a new way of collaborating, because obviously me and Jehnny have known each other for 15 years, and
Mm.
we've collaborated. He produced the Savages Records, my band, before, and we had also a project together in our early 20s when we moved to London, and stayed there for 12 years.
Mhm.
And and he's produced and co-written a lot of the songs on my record. And so music has always been our collaborations, but this was a new way of collaborating, which was very nice, to do something different.
I love that. I was talking to another artist about reaching kind of outside of your normal creation process, and that
Mm.
can then spark something in you. Like if you're used to collaborating with either your bandmates or a producer that you work with, to reach outside of that. And I was like, that's so beautiful that it resulted in this. I can't wait to actually read these stories and see the images. Now, having listened to the music from the album,
Mm.
it was like kind of time wise, I was just like, oh, this is going to be so exciting. I didn't know it was photographs. And now I'm like, oh, I'm very, very excited to delve into this world. Um,
Cool.
yeah. I was like, this is
I'm excited for you.
it's like, this is my jam. How did it
Yeah.
feel to collaborate differently after all those years? Because it sounds like, had you gotten into any sort of routines around collaboration musically that then were shaken up by this?
Well, no, actually, for the record, "To Love Is to Live," we were collaborating again, and we decided we were not going to do it the same way we always had done it before.
Mhm.
So we already had sort of changed the way we worked together, and one of the things we did was to actually um, to include a lot of other people into the process, and
Mm.
so it was not just the two of us, and also to allow a lot of freedom for each of us to work separately,
Got
not necessarily being on each other's back all the time. And yeah, we always come up with new rules and new things to try, and I think rules are important. and for me anyway, they enabled me to find a frame and then to then break the rules when I feel like it, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to break the rules if you don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, but that's why you say what the rules are. Yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah.
That's fascinating. I was thinking about what you were saying about, kind of like the narratives that we tell ourselves about romantic love that we've internalized from outside media. And I was thinking that I really like that you didn't internalize the narrative that you can only do one thing, that like, you kind of without shame
Mm,
just went into writing these dialogues, and that you just let yourself feel that inspiration and let it become something instead of going, oh no, like I'm a songwriter, like this should be in the songs. It's
mm,
like you're just like, no, I wanna
mm,
write in this form, I wanna write in prose, and like you said, to expand the scene in that way,
mm.
and I'm glad you did that.
Yeah. I can't control it. I think I just I never waited for anyone to do anything. I never waited to have an audience to be a musician. I never waited to even be recognized to be an artist. You know, I think that I will always do this, and so to me the sense of accomplishment I get is from finishing a piece of work I've been doing and then moving on to the next. Um, I sometimes surprise myself how much of that is true because even in my relationship with Johnny Hussar, like
Mhm,
the primary base of our relationship is based on creativity and having ideas
mhm,
and
mhm,
and trying out new mediums, and I just think it's in my DNA at this point. And I just um, I, I don't I don't think it will ever end for me. And so when I'm taken by a new inspiration, for example, when I started writing new stories, so I decided to travel on my own and to set up in a city where I didn't know anybody and settle there and write every day and just go out only for my meals and then a
mhm,
little walk every day and then come back and write. And it was sort of sort of a discipline I put on myself to do this, and I was just because I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the routine of that, and I enjoyed the. But at that point, I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have any. I had nothing. Like I was just me doing this thing on my own, and and not really thinking of where it's going to go or what it's going to be. And when Johnny started studying photography, it was the same for
mhm.
him. He was not thinking, oh, one day I'll do a book. No, it wasn't at all thinking that way. And so I'm yeah, I just guess it's part of, even now in confinement when I'm writing and I'm doing
Mhm.
I started again writing lyrics actually,
Oh.
and I feel um again, I don't know what it is for. It's just I can't really, if I don't do it I feel like I'm dying, like
Yeah.
I'm I feel like I'm dying inside, and I feel super unhappy. And I feel no, it's not guilt because it's not like, oh my god, I haven't done anything in my day, but it's more I
Right.
feel a sense of void and a sense of emptiness, and I feel I haven't faced something during the day that I should have been facing, and
Right.
the blank page and the idea of, and just the idea. I miss, I think that the feeling of being inspired
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
is very addictive. I think it is a feeling that feels, it, of course it's frustrating because it doesn't always come. You can be trying to write and you can be, but I think even the days when you don't feel inspired, you should try to write anyway. I think that's what I try to do anyway. And I had an experience recently which actually proved that was a proof of that even more. I was asked for the first time to write a foreword for a book,
Oh.
and it's a book that's going to come out in France,
Mhm.
and it's a book about the bands in UK bands in the 80s, so Joy Division, The Smiths, and
Mm.
The Fall, and and
Mhm.
I was asked to write a foreword, and I had never done that in my life, and I was supposed to write it in French as well, which I really never do. I never write in French.
Goodness.
So So for weeks, so I had a deadline early May, and for weeks I was like, oh, I can't do this. And it was just a pain. Every time I was trying, I was writing, and every time I wrote a sentence, like, this is shit, this is shit. And then but I kept at it and I kept at it. So at some point I had like maybe 10 paragraphs or something. And then I sort of reshaped things, but all the way through, I didn't believe in it. I was all the way through. I was like, this is not right. This is not right. And then I sent it. I first sent it to my sister, actually, because she's I like her to read stuff, and her first impression was really positive. So it gave me a boost, and I was like, okay, maybe I should write this up and send it to the writer and see what he gets, And then I sent it finally, and then the response I had was so positive. He actually was so moved by what I had written, because it was linked to his story, and anyway, and then I felt so happy. And that was Monday, right? And there's been good and bad days during this confinement. That was definitely a good day. That was almost nothing. It was just someone telling me, I love this. I'm so proud to have it on my book, and this is going to be great. And that positivity. And I just thought again about all the process of it. It was so painful. All the way through, I was in disbelief, and I was really feeling, it was hard. Every word was sweat and hard work, but the outcome was so positive. It was a good example for me. I was like, you know what? Never give up, never give up. 50% of the job is doing it, showing up and doing the work, and the rest will work.
I was kind of reflecting on what you're talking about in writing, that you really, it sounds like in some ways when you're talking about the stories that you were writing around the photographs, that flowed completely easily, and you followed that curiosity. And then with writing this forward, it was painful, but you continued to follow it. And I was thinking about what you said about love, and I was thinking about, I don't know if there's a word for that kind of creative love that we have for our inspirations, that we follow them even when they're painful or when they're easy. It's like, no, we must follow them, because you showed such love in both of those works that you just described. And I was like, there's got to be a word in some language that describes that sort of love, that you have that spark, you have that curiosity, and you're like, I must follow you, even when it's very difficult.
Yeah, and I still can't explain, for someone who's been in a relationship for 15 years now, I still can't explain how it works. Why? Because there's always a moment you have a choice. There's always a moment where you see the doorway and you can stop it and you can go away. But there's always, there's something that stops you from doing that, and I don't know what it is. And that's just what you're saying about finding the right word, and make me think of that. It's just, I don't know how to find the right word for love. Is not even the right word. I think it's love is too much attached to it, too much cliches, too much images. So there's something else. It's an attachment to your work, and an attachment to another being. And where it's almost like a promise you've made at some point, and that you're never going to break no matter what. I remember when I was a kid, when you have to make wishes when you're for birthdays and things like that. Of course. So I'm not able to say my wish, actually. I just realized, because if I say it, it will break. So I don't know how to finish this sentence, but I just remember that it's just a promise that you make to yourself, and I think that's rooted deep in childhood, about the commitment you put into something. It's like great athletes, they never give up no matter what. And I think there's the resilience is something that it's a quality that you absolutely need when you're creating something, I think. And trying to keep away the bad thoughts because they always come. Of course. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like when you were speaking of, working on that forward, that you had those thoughts of doubt, and that you had the thoughts that it wasn't reflecting what you wanted, and that you said like, oh, the sentence was shit, and then you were just going to throw it away. That it's like, even when those doubts came in, you didn't let the doubts overtake you. You had the commitment that you were like, nope, I'm going to finish this. It's going to be hard,
Yeah.
but I'm going to finish it. And that speaks to me of like the choice that we have, whether it's in relation to other
Mm,
people or to our work, that it's like you can choose something over and over again.
mm. Exactly. And I still find myself pushing, and I can sense when it's hard, when I feel like I'm pushing the bull up the hill, which is kind of what's happening now with the situation, with the releasing a record and the whole touring going away. And because of
Yeah.
the situation that in the
Yeah.
world right now, and so it's harder. It's and I was thinking that I was like, what, it's already hard to release a record, but this is even harder. And you
Right.
know what, I mean, it's in a way, when I started making music, I moved to London when I was 20 with
Mhm.
Jehnny Beth, and we started playing clubs all around the city. Wherever they would want us, we'd play in front of one person, sometimes zero.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think, and we'd carry our gear, up and down the narrow stairs, and I
Oh my
broke
gosh,
my back
you said
many
in the tube.
times.
That sounds horrible.
And it was amazing. I had some of the best times of my life. It was just us doing our thing and not asking or waiting for anybody to tell us what to do or how to do it.
Yeah.
And I built my whole career doing that, I think. So when the world collapses, which is what's happening now, when
Mhm.
everything disappears, I still have me. I still have
Yeah.
that relationship to the work, and I've been there. You know what? I know what it is, to have no one who believes in you. And
Yeah.
right now I have an amazing team who's working on my record. So I have a lot of people who believe in me, and so it's even better than it used to be. But I still can find that place where it's hard. You know what? And you tell yourself in your head, well, it's going to be hard, but
Yeah.
I know hard.
You're like, I'm on it. I'm totally on it. And
I know hard. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fascinating that you said that thinking about that relationship to oneself, because I was thinking about that you'd already kind of given yourself a sneak preview in a way of having
Mm.
your writing time that you took, that you went to a different city, you were on your own,
Yeah.
you had set up almost like a prelude to where we are now. And so in
Yeah.
a way you had already reflected on, well, what is it like to have this relationship with myself? Though I can imagine it would be jarring to have to return to that when you had been in a time with releasing a record. That, I mean, listeners would know that that's usually when you're going out on tour and you're seeing
Exactly. Yeah.
and you're getting to celebrate the fact
Yeah.
that you probably had been kind of either alone or with your collaborators pretty tightly, and
Yeah.
it's like a flower blooming where all of a sudden you're like, "Ta-ta,
Yeah.
here I am."
Yeah. I was definitely gearing up to go on tour and to go out into the world. I was not going into introspective mood. I was
Right.
going to outrospective, and being out there and
Yeah.
defending this record and
Yeah.
celebrating, as you say, because it's been quite insular and within looking sort of process. So I was looking forward to, do the opposite, which is
Yeah.
always the balance, with the life of a musician. It's like there's a moment where you're in and the moment where you're out,
Yeah.
and I love both of them. I learned how way to like the moments where I'm with myself, and because I'm more of an out person.
Mhm.
I was always the kid who was putting on the plays and doing putting on the show and trying to make everybody laugh. And so I think, I'm very comfortable on stage, and I'm very open to that experience. So, but now I'm forced to stay in even longer than
Right.
I've trained myself.
Right. And also in some ways it's very different. I think that people are underestimating that it's different when it's a choice as opposed to something that you
Yeah.
do.
I think for artists it's really hard because we hate to do what everybody else is doing. I mean, personally, that's
Yes.
how I feel. I hate to do what I'm told to do. I hate to um I don't, it's like a lesson in humility. It's like I love staying in when everybody's out, for instance. I love
Yes.
doing exactly the opposite of what everybody else is doing. It's a great feeling, that to feel like you're isolating yourself when everybody is going out to celebrate something or whatever. Like
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, for instance. I hate New Year's Eve. I
I
love staying at on New Year's Eve because I feel like there's a tension
yeah,
suddenly. I'm creating a friction, and I'm saying no, and I think saying no is very important.
I
Um,
hilariously, I feel much the same way. I tend to spend New Year's Eve not in the city. I feel you very much in regards of being almost contrarian, where I'm always up quite late and I tend to work on music quite late. But now everyone is
mm.
home, and it makes me want to do crazy things like not be in my home in the middle of the night making music, despite the fact that that's what I love doing. And I'm like,
Yeah,
but what is this new thing inside of me that now, great, now I want to go to a cafe. Now I want
yeah.
to.
Yeah, now I want to go and party and go to a rave party or whatever. Yeah, no.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it is that.
Now I want gigs more than ever.
Yes, whereas before
Yeah.
I'm like, ugh, do I have to play a gig? Fine, I guess I'll leave the studio.
Hmm.
Now I'm like,
Oh
anyway,
no, I've never been like that actually, to be honest. I was more referring to being in the audience. I don't enjoy much
ah,
festival audiences or being in the crowds, but now I
oh,
feel actually all I want is to be in a mosh pit right now.
oh. Yeah, because you had said that you like to perform, and I think that that's something that would be really hard, quite honestly, like putting out an album and not being able to perform it. Because I would assume, like, had you already
Hmm.
planned everything for like your stage show and things like that for the tour?
Yeah, we worked like for 6 months on the show, and it was took some time to find the right musicians, and then putting, it was like a reverse strategy because I made the record completely forgetting about the stage aspect, which was the
Hmm.
opposite way I had always worked. With Savages, it was always about the live aspect of things, and then the record. We'd even write songs on stage,
Oh, wow.
so so I for this record, I was thinking, no, I'm going to do the opposite of everything I've done before. So, including I'm making a record. I'm not thinking of the live. And so, when it was time to think of the concerts and things like that, it was just working backwards and just trying to find the best way to do it. And we worked hard on this, like for 6 months, and then we were ready, and we did a show. Thank God we did a show, at least one, at
You
the
did
BBC
one.
Six Festival at the Roundhouse in London,
Ooh.
and it was amazing. It was. I knew we had the show. I knew everything was working really well,
Mhm.
and we were ready to go on tour. So I was really happy. But yeah, we'll come back.
I'm glad that you got the one show before
At
this,
least, yeah.
because I can't imagine working for that long and not getting any kind of like catharsis on it at all.
At least, yeah. At least we had that. It would have been awful.
Oh, it was just like that would be the worst feeling.
Mm.
I was imagining also that now you're kind of forced into that introspective space again, and I was wondering like how you're staying curious in the same way that you stayed curious about your writing process, that you were like, oh well, I wasn't writing lyrics and so I wrote prose, and now you're writing lyrics. And I was wondering kind of like what sparked your curiosity this time around to return to lyrics.
Um, I know the answer, but I feel like I don't want to tell it to you because
Ooh.
because it's so fresh for me, and I
Totally.
feel like if I share this, I will sort of, I'm afraid, maybe it's a fear, but I'm afraid to that we would destroy it, because sometimes when you have the feeling you found something that is a new inspiration for writing, it has to be secret for a while, because it feels like I love the feeling of having found something that nobody else has,
Hmm.
and so if I said, I could probably say it wouldn't be bad, but I just prefer to not take the risk and just keep it for me right now.
I would love for you to keep it for you. My best friend and I call those baby bird songs that like we'll be writing and the other will message the other and say, "Oh, what are you working on?" And if one of us says that it's a baby bird song, we know that it's like it's too early. Like it's in its early
Yeah,
stage. We can't share it yet, even with our best friend. We can't.
yeah,
It's too
yeah.
precious. It's almost like bursting the bubble of a fantasy that's like just begun. You're like, no, no, just let me have this fantasy moment.
Yeah, and I think inspiration is like it starts with a very, very fickle sort of candlelight, so almost, you know, it's and it's very fragile, and you need to nurture it and preserve it, and do everything you can to keep it alive and make it grow. So yeah.
I completely understand, and I'm actually glad that you said, like, no, I'm not gonna say it right now. No, protect it and nurture it, because I know that then later it's gonna grow into something absolutely beautiful and epic. Like when I was listening to your record last night, that's what I was thinking of when you said that you were nurturing it right now and protecting it, because I can see sort of what grows from your inspiration. And I was like, yes, do your thing. We will we will see the thing when it is ready to come out. And I was wondering on that record, because you had really interesting collaborators, and it kind of it dovetailed in my mind with what you were saying about the photographs. And I was wondering how you chose the collaborators you did, and kind of what that process is like when you are ready to share with people.
On this record, I was very open to share the work quite early on with the potential collaborators, which was the exact opposite of the way I had worked before in my band Savages, where we would basically not play anything to anyone until it was finished. And there was this protectiveness going on, which was essential and important at the time, but I felt a bit suffocating, you know, of that process. And I felt for this record, I want to try things I had never tried. And I wanted freshness and fresh ideas and fresh methods and fresh people, you know, people who can influence me in a different way. So one of the methods I've now tried was to actually be very open very early on with the work and the work in progress, musically and also lyrically. And he paid off, because I think what happened is sometimes when you protect an idea for too long, and you don't want it to be altered by other people, you also prevent it from being the best it can be. Because when you open your work, you have to be open to comments and criticism, not critique, you know, criticism. And
constructive.
and if you, and if you're open to criticism, then you're open to improve it. And I think that's what I've been doing on this record. Whether when I was working with Atticus Ross from 9 Inch Nails, or sending him our demos, you know, and he was always very, very positive about what we would send to him. He was very, you know, he always loved every vocal I would send, and he always praised the lyrics, and he would just be very precise about what he thinks could be improved in the music, and what he could bring, and he wanted to talk in depth about that, and before he'd do anything, any work. And but I think, and that's what I've heard from the people, like Flood always said that I was really open to his influence into the production of some of the songs, including the latest songs I've just released from the record called Heroin, which he produced. And open for him to say, this doesn't work, you know, this song doesn't work. How can we improve it? And I'm never offended by that. And I think in the long run, I think it's just I'm looking for the best idea, and it doesn't really matter if it comes from me or not. In the end, I know it's my record, and I know I've got the final say. And if the main idea that needs to be removed of the song is my only input into the song, then so be it, you know. For Heroin, for instance, one of the tracks on the record, I had to rewrite all the lyrics. It was a song called Heroism originally, and Flood was like, it should be called Heroin, and you should write about this, and, you know. And so I had to really shape everything. And when he said that, there was a part of me who thought, well, if you say this, there's no song, because basically you've taken out the whole core of the song.
Heart of the song.
And you asked me to replace the heart of the song. So I'd rather write a new song, because this is like getting rid of everything. And but you have that instant thought, and then you sort of calm yourself, and you're like, hang on,
Yep.
I can do this. It's a little bit like the preface experience I was telling you about earlier on. You're with your pen and paper and you're like, I can't do this, and then you write a sentence and you're like, I can't do this, and then the more you go, then you've got 10 lines, and then you just do it, and you don't know why, but it works. And so sometimes you have to not listen to your feelings, and I think I've learned in the work especially to sometimes to just not care about how I feel.
Yep.
Of course, you have to feel the music, but sometimes feelings can be triggered by fear,
Yes.
and sometimes you don't feel anything, but that doesn't mean that it's not good, so it's not just all about enjoyment and about belief in the work. If I believe in the work, it means it's good. No, you can really love something it's actually crap. So so it's hard, but it's getting that balance, I guess.
Well, and when you mentioned kind of the difference in this versus when you said that you would sometimes write songs on stage, like that to me almost like speaks of the trust that you have with him, and like then you formed this trust with new people for this record. And from what you're saying, it sounds like you did trust them because it helped you push through those fears.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, and it reminded me of something a client of mine had said that I love, that they were like, well, you have your first thoughts about something, but your first thoughts are sometimes garbage. So really you want to look to your second thoughts and maybe your third thoughts, and like, because you might have one of those like defensive reactions of, but I wrote this, isn't it good? Or like, oh, but this is the heart of the song. And so like your first thought might be one of like defense or hurt. And then if you look what's past that feeling, it's like, okay, you can have that initial, oh, but I liked what I said. And then once you get past that, it's like, well, but what else could be said? Why is this person telling me this about this song? What else could this song be? And it's like letting go of that attachment to it. And I loved that they said that, because now sometimes when I have reactions that are defensive, I'm like, oh, okay, that was a first thought. We can maybe toss that one in the bin and move on to the next thought.
Yeah, it's also trying to find the courage, to go a little bit further. And I think also you need to, I know a lot of people who would stop at the first draft because it's this idea that if I'm asked to rework, it means I'm not. It's too much to ask, for some people to reconsider or to have self-doubt, about your own work, and to second guess what you're doing. But I think sometimes, though, it's important to trust your guts, and the first reaction you have to something is very important, and if you don't like something, you don't like something, and there's no one that can argue that, it's you're the artist, and if you don't like it, you don't like it, and no one can be like, yeah, but it reminds me of this, it can be that, and yeah, but I don't like it, so there's no arguing. So I guess what I discovered in this scenario, being a solo artist, I suppose, is the fact that I have final say, and it's my record, so I can always get people in and bring, for them to have all these ideas and for me to be excited. But when I decide it's a no, no one can,
Yeah, no one can say otherwise. It's yours.
No, yeah. So
yeah, and
it's a nice position to be in.
Yeah, because sometimes with other art forms, because I read that you act as well, and it sounds like in a way, like, though, for instance, you would do multiple takes, ultimately then it's up to the editor and the director and the producer.
Yeah, it's a total different game.
Yeah, that you might
it's a total loss of control, acting.
Yeah,
you surrender everything. You surrender your image to someone else, basically, and you have to trust that they would, show you some. I understand why actors don't watch films they've been acting in, because it must be awful sometimes, just because some details, they chose the take where you did something you didn't like, or the take after was better, but they chose it for technical issues. They chose this one before, and all these micro decisions that the audience doesn't really notice. For you as an actor is unbearable, because you losing the control. I mean, an actor, it shouldn't be unbearable for an actor. It should be their job, really. But because it's not exactly my job, I sometimes struggle with the idea of surrendering, control.
Yeah. And I respected that. I think it was Adam Driver that walked out of an interview after saying that he didn't want to watch footage of himself. And then they played footage of him and he excused himself from the interview. And I respect that he had that boundary for that exact reason.
Yeah.
That, because in a way, I love the way that you phrased it, that it's like you're surrendering. And if you aren't the one that's making those decisions, why would you even be able to comment upon it? Because in a way, you've kind of thrown out all these kind of ideas and collages, and then someone else has chosen one of them. And so if they want to talk about
it's
it,
not your job.
Yeah, it's like talk to the director. Why would you?
Yeah,
why would you ask me?
Yeah, and I think there's again trying to preserve something in your own performance, or if you want to be in the character. I think good actors are people who surround it all and not half of it. Who are not conscious of what their face is doing while they're doing it. And who are not conscious of the camera, and so it's a real. That's why it's such a fucked up job to be an actor. I don't think I could do it. It's a real you really surrender. You really, really, really surrender yourself. It's total submission in a way. you totally let go, and it's very interesting.
It sounds
people
like
who can do that. That's why I'm fascinated by actors who can act bad guys or bad people. Because they allow people to see a side of themselves that they wouldn't let anybody see. Everyone have their own censorship. You don't. No matter how much people say, I don't care what everybody thinks of me. I think we still have this sort of defense mechanisms where we're trying to be perceived at least not too badly. And so people who act bad guys, they have really surrounded that image control thing, because they allow. That's one of the first things you learn when you're doing acting classes is if you're trying to people who act bad guys but still trying to be cool, it doesn't really work. It's you have to really be the bad guy, and that's hard, to allow people to see that. It's very vulnerable.
It reminded me of what you were talking about initially in the writing of the stories of tapping into fantasies, and particularly into darker emotions, that it's especially with acting, you actually do have to, in a way, go there, and not just mentally go there, but
except writing a book is very, you're protected, you're not there in the flesh, and you're not so it's easier, I think, to do it in a book, at least for me.
Now I'm curious, did you play a bad guy?
Actually I did in a French film that's coming out in July. I play Anglo-Saxon mercenary, very angry killer.
Oh my god.
And I'm the right hand side, or right hand person of or warrior of Sting, who plays another character in the movie. And the movie is it's a comedy, but it's also an epic historical movie.
Whoa.
And it's really it's one of the most expected movies in France, because it was a TV series that ended 10 years ago, about King Arthur. And the Quest of Grail, and it was a very funny cult TV series, and they're now finally making a movie out of it. So,
oh my gosh,
people are expecting that a lot.
What's it called?
Camelot.
That's a good name for the story you just described. Well, that's appropriate. Well, I would imagine, given everything, that hopefully we'll be able to stream it, because I was like, yeah, I'm very curious what the bad guy in that context would mean. Um,
Mm.
do you think that when productions start up again, do you think you'd want to act again? Or do you think that now that you've gone through that experience, you're like, okay, I've done that and maybe that's not for me? Or like, what are your feelings on that?
No, I like it. I mean, I've been in 2 movies since I've been back to France.
Mhm.
Auditioning when people want to see me try some stuff. I mean, acting is a very difficult job in the sense of you get so little compared to how much you audition.
Mhm.
And that's why I didn't want it. I didn't want to do it as my main job when I was younger,
Mhm.
and I had the choice. I chose to leave to London and be a musician instead. So it felt
Mhm.
like I had my life in my hands, and instead of waiting for someone to offer me a job, it was unbearable. That feeling for me, and so I do castings and stuff, and I've been casted for some stuff, but I rarely get the job. I think it's just the nature of being an actor.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
most of actors, I mean, people don't really talk about that, but it's just a lot of it is just trying to get a job,
Yeah.
and so luckily it doesn't occupy my days and nights because I've got other things going on. So so I'm lucky that way. So I can just do it, and if I'm not chosen, then it's okay. Like I've got
Right.
other things.
Right.
Um, but I do meet some incredible people though, and I always hope to do more, and with great directors, and whenever there's a chance, and I always think that luck and chance, passes by more than once in a lifetime, and
Yes.
it's just about knowing when it does and recognizing it and being able to seize your chance, which I've done for the 2 films that I've done. So whenever luck passes by again, I will jump on it.
Mm. Well, and it speaks to remaining like curious and open to when things come by that inspire you in any form. Just being like, yeah, I'll hop on that train.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even though even if you don't know you can do it. I mean, I've been hosting my own TV show for now a few months in France. Started
Mhm.
a music TV show called Echoes with Jehnny Beth. That you can stream on YouTube, and it's in English and everything. It's with different musicians who come and perform with an audience, and then have a discussion with me. And
Ah.
the whole thing is edited together and in an hour show. And I've had King Cool, and I've had Jeff Barrow of Portishead. I had
Mhm.
Idols, Primus Cream. I had and the next one I'll have Kim Gordon, Ed
Ooh.
O'Brien. So there's a really good, mix of people. And when I was offered to do this, or to try to think of a concept for a TV show and what I would want to do, I
Mhm.
didn't know I could do it. I didn't. I was like, I've never done this, but what the heck, why not? I think I can do this. Let's try. And curiosity, I think, is gonna get the better of me someday. I I just feel curious, and I know I learned something doing it, and also I learned how to do it on the way,
Yes.
and why not?
And it's much like you said on your album that the worst that happens is that something doesn't work. And then you don't have to do
Yeah,
it. And the best that happens is you come out with an album. Like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I love that.
Yeah, what's there to lose?
Exactly. Exactly. I think that, normally I would ask people at the end of an interview, like, what would you suggest to anybody who is
Mm.
creative or aspires to be a creative? And I think that that in itself is beautiful advice that you just said is, like, well, I'll learn along the way. Like, why not do it?
It's funny. It reminds me of my when I was maybe 12 or something like that. I was working at my desk one day in my bedroom, and my dad opened the door and walked in, and he didn't say a word, and he just put on my desk a piece of paper and then left the room. And then I picked up the piece of paper. It was like a small square, and on it he had written a quote from the poet René Char. And if I translate it well, it said, impose your luck, hold on to your happiness, run to your risk. Looking at you, they will get used to it.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really nice.
Oh.
And it was one of the most important advice I think I've received from my dad. And it stayed with me, and I still have it with me.
That's exactly what I was thinking was, where's that scrap of paper?
Yeah, I have it. I have it here. It's always with me. I've got a working space in Paris where I come and work with. There's a desk, my piano, sofa, window, and I have it here in this room. So.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful talisman, and that the way you translate it is, running towards your risk, and that. And then, as you were saying before, that, worrying about what people think of you, that the line about that they'll get used to it.
Yeah, they'll get used to it.
Yeah.
It's true. They always do.
Exactly. That's beautiful. I was like, everyone should have such a gift of a poem like that. And especially when you're in the midst of your work, to have, even reflecting back on that kind of love that we were speaking of, that I was like, that's the kind of love that we need, is people to drop by little poems like that.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever love that's called.
Yeah. My father wasn't, he didn't speak much, but he would, that was this type of language, other people's words. He would share them a lot.
Oh, well, and now you get to share them with us, and that's so cool.
My pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I know that it's an extraordinary circumstance, and so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And be safe, take care, and hopefully meet you in the flesh at some point when all of this is just a bad memory.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Why Not Both? If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who has been absolutely amazing. Thank you again, and I look forward to next week's episode.